I'm glad you've joined us on the interview. You may not realize it yet, but your life is about to change. So glad you joined us this week on the interview. I have two very good friends, and I'm going to introduce you to them. Mike Isley from Texans for Israel.
Hi, Rick.
Caleb Waller from Hayabel and the Joshua and Caleb Report, et cetera, et cetera.
Amen.
Honored to be here.
It's good to have you.
Thank you.
Mike, we're going to turn to you first. What the heck are you doing? What are you doing here in Amarillo? You tell me why you live here.
You know, life gets exciting. What in the world are we doing here at this studio? This is amazing. This is a miracle.
This is my first day in the studio, and I am totally ecstatic about what you guys are achieving here in this little place. It's like amazing how a message can be told to the world from what you guys have set up here. And I'm hearing the impact of what you guys are having around the globe already just a couple months into establishing this. And I'm just like, wow, where have we come to with technology? You know, where have we come to that the truth can be broadcast through the world? And I mean, just the impact you're having in, you know, even Iraq and all these places, you're like, the message can now reach these people with just the click of a button. And that's what's happening. I mean, it's awesome.
We're so glad you're here. It's really hard to have a message to the world. So,
you know,
it's a great day.
When we set this up, we thought, you know, we can't get locked in like a lot of other networks have in their technological scheme. To break out of it would be so expensive. And so we just set up a very flexible way of doing broadcasting, and we're in at least as many places as most of them are, if not more places, because of the technology, like you said.
Yeah, it's amazing. We got to keep up with the times we're living in. Things are getting, you know, we've gotten to where, you know, unbelievable video footage is going into the nations. Now it's at the place where the quality has reached, it's a pretty awesome height. The only thing that's happening now is that everything's getting faster. It's like, boom, it's right at your fingertips. That is what's
happening. How is internet in Israel? Is it pretty good?
No, I mean, it's pretty good. They're you know, it's a small little country, so it doesn't take too much to get, you know, broadcast through there.
Now, we were going to jump to you first, and I just had something in my head, and that is, we're kind of looking at what you guys are doing in Israel and how we can do better at partnering back and forth.
So let's start out how we met.
Yeah, let's do it.
How did we meet?
Oh, yeah. That was funny. I think I was sitting like one row behind you, I believe it. And I had just graduated from Dave Ramsey's course on youth finances, right? And so I was 17 at the time. And so I was looking at my guys and I just said, you know what? This guy looks like a Dave Ramsey guy, or at least he knows how to do something with money. And so I remember tapping him on the shoulder and said, hey, you kind of look like a Dave Ramsey guy. Who are you? And Mike's like, thanks. I guess I should take that as a compliment, right? And so we started our whole conversation because we were at a event for Israel event in D.C.
We were at a Q5 event, and what I remember, I thought they said, "Are you Dave? You kind of look like Dave Ramsey or something." And I had just been to a Dave Ramsey event in Nashville, and I was going, "Whoa!" And then you said, "You have got to meet our dad." Right. So they take me over to see Tommy Waller.
Now, was that your first time meeting?
That was my first time meeting Tommy Waller. And we just clicked, and we immediately became best friends. And so, and Tommy and these guys have changed my life. I don't know where I'd be today without knowing you guys. So it's just an honor to have you in Amarillo. As you're now a much older. That was many years ago.
You don't really look like you're in your 50s.
Yeah, I got a little more hair like that.
It's water and water. You used an acronym. I want you to explain to people what that is. KUFI. What is that?
KUFI is Christians United for Israel. And that's what Pastor Hagee started 12 years ago. And it's an amazing organization where Christians come
this
together.
jackhammer is like ramming in the back of the mic, so don't let it distract you. But this is fun. I don't think it's a problem. We just get together, right? The jackhammer coming up.
I'm listening to a outside of the studio going, okay.
Well,
anyway, you know what that is? That's ITVN growing.
That's right. We're building on.
You're building on. That's right. I love it.
But many years, Tommy and these guys have been to Christian Giant for Israel, and that's where we've met hundreds, maybe thousands of friends that are non-Jews and Jewish in Washington, D.C. And that's why one of the things that has happened with Hayabel, there's a huge presence in the world today. But that started, it was kind of how we connected. That's how I met y'all, and y'all met a lot of other people.
You became such a part of our family, Mike. And I think you have that effect on a lot of people. For some reason, you just kind of come right in and they're just like, Uncle Mike, here he comes in. He's part of the crew.
I'm Uncle Mike to a lot of people.
Yeah. So
I told Tommy I'm your 12th son.
Yeah, right.
Because I want all the benefits of. I don't know how that works. But,
there's actually 7 sons in your family, so 11 children. So you get, I guess you.
Oh, that's right.
That's right. So
they have 11 kids. Tommy and Sherry has 11 kids.
And you get to eat.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
The reality of it is the only, well, I mean, I've been in so many homes actually, and I travel around the world extensively, and I've interacted with a lot of people. But the amazing thing about being in a large family is there's never a dull moment. There's always a pulsing energy that's coming from that, and that's what's happening right now. I mean, as with Ayuval, we've grown. Man, we've been in action for about 12 years now, and now 7 of us children are married. They're part of the Waller family. We're all working full time in the organization, along with around 60 other staff. So I mean, we went from this little hometown, picking organic produce, to all of a sudden now we're launching these operations in Israel that are changing the world. And to me, I just look back and go, wow, I had no idea what God had in store here. I had no idea that just picking, growing those organic. We did farm to table in Tennessee before it was even popular. Like today's time, you say farm to table and everybody's like, oh yeah, you pick the grapes that morning, or you pick the tomatoes that morning, you pick the strawberries that morning, and it's on their table that afternoon, right? And that was back in the 90s we were doing that, or late 90s. And now all of a sudden my dad made a trip to Israel and he said, the farmers in Israel need us. And so we sold our entire operation, launched over to Israel, and started working. And then, within just a very short bit, all of our friends that we knew in Tennessee wanted to start coming, and then it's reached around the globe. And today, we've run in over 28 different countries, and we've run over 3,000 volunteers to volunteer on the mountains of Israel.
And may I say,
amazing
to go to the hills of Israel, of Samaria, to live. I remember the first time I was there. It was rough, but to pick grapes and get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to pick grapes all day, and then it's the most wonderful experience of my life. And just to meet the farmers and the people of Israel, you just meet the neatest people from around the world. So it's changed my life. So it really has.
I'm trying for a moment to think outside of our box, that we're kind of in a box, and that box is that we're aware of the situation in Israel, we're aware of the prophecies, where, people coming in, why that's so important to Israel. But somebody coming from outside of our understanding may not have a clue of why that's more important than picking potatoes in Idaho.
Right.
So let's talk about that.
Tell about the verse about the stranger, which I believe Tommy and many rabbis would tell Tommy Waller, you are the stranger. So,
Isaiah 61 mentions that. Basically, it says the sons of the foreigner shall be your plowman and your vine dresser. And to me, that's amazing. Now, prophecy is such a complicated subject. Why? Because you guys have been around a little longer than I have. But I know just in my short, lifespan, I'm now 26. I've heard probably 50 different ideas about the interpretation of the prophecy, how it was supposed to be, and a prediction. I mean, in 2015, the king was coming back, right? And everybody was like, woo, it's going crazy. Right? Then all of a sudden, 2015 came and gone. It's like, now we're up, right? And so people in my generation are a little bit burned out on all this prophecy stuff.
Yeah.
And so I actually, at 14 years old, I went to a prophecy conference one time, and I walked out of the prophecy conference, not necessarily educated on prophecy, but more importantly, I was like, I'm just not interested in prophecy. Why? Because prophecy is something to me that is just like gloom and doom, and all hell's breaking loose in the world. We're all going to be just going, God help us, right? But all of a sudden, I went to Israel when I was 14. It was the same year I went to Israel when I was 14. As I was standing on the mountains of Israel, something clicked with me. Something hit me so strong, because I was meeting with another Israeli friend that I met there on that trip, and he turned to me and he said, Caleb, we Jews don't study prophecy to foretell the future. We study prophecy to recognize what's happening when it happens. And to me, that transformed my entire perspective. Why? Because in Christianity, we're almost into fortune telling. We're almost like, who can make this biggest pitch and make the biggest perspective? Which I respect a lot of those guys that give their life to study a prophecy. But I've been around long enough to know that nobody's right. It's just like, even though they may have it lined out and they've got NASA now on their part, they got it all figured out or this sort of thing, and then all of a sudden it's like,
true story.
Ooh, things are crazy, right? And so I say it to say, when it talks about the foreigners coming to the mountains of Israel, if I was telling you, okay, we brought my family to work on the mountains of Israel, I don't think you could give me permission to say, Caleb, that's a fill-in prophecy. But when I tell you that in the last 10 years, there's been over 3,000 foreigners coming to the mountains of Israel and participating in the agriculture redemption of Israel, then what do you say to that? You say, I know the devil's not doing that. I know the enemy is not advocating for the establishment of the Jewish communities in Israel. So maybe we're in a season now that all of a sudden God's back on the dance floor in Israel again. All of a sudden, after 2,000 years of desolation, just look at history. 4,000 years gave us our Bible, right? And then the Bible closes. That's a history book. It's all telling the stories about a particular piece of real estate in the Middle East, right? And so then the Bible closes. Well, in that 2,000-year gap between now and today, we have an issue because Christianity was founded during that time. And that religion was created on a basis of not necessarily any connection to a physical land of Israel. That was just basically, it's kind of like an Israel, the church floating in the sky, something, it was just kind of something that was out there, right? And the reality of it is as a young guy, I was 14, a lot of things shifted in my life at 14. I was struggling with that because I was kind of like, I can't have a faith that is just a pie in the sky, feel good, be happy, love, and then as long as you're a good Christian, good Christian, it's like, what is I need something tangible. I'm like a guy that has to touch things. Like I have to feel things, right? And so what I'm saying to that is when I touched the mountains of Israel and said, I can actively take and participate in this restoration process, taking something that's been forgotten for 2,000 years, bring it back to life. Because I'll tell you, my life mission right now is to see the land of Israel become like the Garden of Eden again. Amen. That's massive. To think about being able to walk into Jerusalem and to take a full, 360 view and turn yourself around and look around and go, there's no beauty in the world that captures this. And we, in Christianity, can look at it from two perspectives. We can say, God's going to snap his fingers and this new heaven, it's going to drop from heaven and it's going to transform the whole real estate and all of a sudden, boom, it's going to be this glorious place. And all of a sudden, we're just going to wake up one morning and go, wow, everything changed. Or we can say, and look at history. So history, God has always used people to fulfill his purposes.
That's right.
And so today's time, I believe God's putting it in people's hearts to begin doing things that are bringing his glory back into earth again. Obviously I'm a Christian and I'm connected to my Messiah, and even his prayer, he was, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so it's talking about the glory of God coming to earth. And since Jerusalem is the epicenter of that, if any way possible, we can stand with our Jewish brothers in their fight for the land, and their fight for God, and their fight for righteousness. I think that is an amazing mission. And I've found such awesome peace in standing side by side with the people of Israel, the Jewish people, God's chosen people, because God's preserved them for thousands of years and given them a particular mission. And today, they're fighting for the land. And it's time for Christianity to wake up and say, let's participate in this process. Right. So that's what
you're reminding me of something that happened to me years ago. I had always gone to Israel with a bunch of people. And one time, through our friend Jeremy Nard, I was invited to go to Israel. Well, I had never flown by myself over to Israel. So I remember, thinking, okay, I need to take a Valium. I'm freaking out. But, it was like God said, get on that plane. And I remember putting my seatbelt on. And it was like this God thing came over me and said, okay, you did your part. You got on the plane. Just hang on to the ride. And, that has been an amazing story of my life. Because if you just get in the plane and put your seatbelt on and say, God, let's go.
Right.
And the experiences I've had with you, just think of if we said, no, Lord, I'm scared. I don't want to go do anything over in Israel. It's too dangerous. Right. But every time God takes us to higher plateaus. I mean, just think of all the people you know, the experiences you've had. And that's what I would tell people. Go get on that plane, put that seatbelt on, and just go and let God do his thing.
Right.
Because I'm always amazed at just the
Mike,
big story.
I've never met anybody who went to Israel, came back not saying it was safer there than I felt in my own city.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been working in Israel for the past 12 years, in and out. Like, I basically go there for the trips, and we bring the volunteers and come out. I work in the West Bank. Okay. I mean,
Samaria and Judea.
right? And people would say that's the most dangerous place on the earth, right? And I was challenged by that because I'm like, I feel safer, like you just said, I feel safer there than I do here. Even, let me tell you this, I was the first responder about a year ago today to a terrorist attack. I was the first responder. 2 IDF soldiers got jumped.
I saw that video.
Yeah,
That's
the
right.
guys got jumped. They came running. They basically came running towards me. And when they got to where I was at, like I was the first line, like I was sitting there like, Lord, what is going on, right?
Yeah.
But the amazing thing is, I mean, I had complete peace through the whole thing, even though these guys have been, not to get into gory detail, but stabbed multiple times, and one of the guys still had a knife in his back where he got to it.
Oh my gosh.
And me and a couple of the volunteers were there, and we're just like, wow. I mean, crazy thing is 2 minutes go by, and there's 300 IDF soldiers there. I mean, the players are going, I mean, the whole play, like, literally for, like, this is crazy. But the miraculous thing is I had complete peace through the whole process.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think a lot of people sometimes don't fully comprehend. Like the choice of peace a lot of times is something that a lot of people are always trying to go, we just want, just find that place. But the reality of it is, and you guys have probably had this experience in your life where, you have that something kind of itch in the stomach that kind of goes, you know what? There's something inside of me that says, do this. And I know it's the most crazy thing in the world. Everybody thinks I'm ridiculous for this, but I know this is the next step I've got to take. And people do it. And that's what's taking place. I mean, I tell you a crazy story that just happened to me. That happened a year ago. But then just in the past month or so, I was in Israel. And I had the privilege of visiting this family in a town called Silwan. Now, Silwan, if you get Jerusalem, you get the Temple Mount right there. And then you get the valley between the Temple Mount and the Mount of Olives, right? That big valley right there. Well, if you go down south, go down the valley, right? You enter this little community called Silwan. Well, 1929, the Arabs basically, there was a lot of riots during that time, and they drove the Jewish residents out of that town. And so back. History basically happens, but the Jewish residents were never allowed never come back to their ancient homes. And finally, one person, one of the grandchildren of one of the people that actually was driven out of there, was able to buy a house right in the middle of this now completely Arab town.
Wow.
Okay. So it's a crazy story, a lot of details to it, but I'm going in there with a guide who takes me in and says, Caleb, I want to show you one of the most amazing things you've ever seen in your life. And so I go into this neighborhood, and the streets are very narrow and things, and I'm just completely surrounded by the Arab residents there. And these Arab residents absolutely hate the Jewish presence there. I mean, the young kids that are on the street are making like obscene gestures at me with their hands, and you just feel an evil presence coming from them, which you are hurt for them because you're like, God, what's going on here? What's happening? And I wasn't necessarily filled with a hatred towards them at all. It was just mainly just like, why do they hate me so much, right? And so he takes me to this home in the middle of this community, and in the middle of this, completely Arab neighborhood, and you're just winding these narrow streets, and all of a sudden around the corner, and I'm looking at this house. And my first impression of this house was, what on earth has happened to this place? It's smeared with black burn marks all over the front, bullet holes all into the concrete on the front of this house. And it's crazy. And the guy tells me, he says, Caleb, this house in the past few months has had 140 attacks on the house, documented, like police actually documented 140 attacks on this home. And I'm looking at this and I'm just like, what on earth? This is insane. And so we knock on the door, and the security guy that was inside the house opens us, who's there? So we identify ourselves, they knew we were coming. So he opens the door, lets us in, and as I'm walking across the threshold into this home, I feel like I stepped from hell into heaven. And as I step into the house, around the corner from the kitchen area comes this mom with a baby on her hip, smiles this really big, says, Shalom, welcome to my home. And I'm speechless. I couldn't talk. I was just like, how on earth are you raising a family in this hell?
Yeah.
What are you doing here? And she turns to me and she says, Caleb, this is my mission. And those words continue to ring in my head today over and over and over again. Because if you find your mission for your life, you could be in the craziest places. You could be in the most unbelievable places and have the complete peace of God.
Yeah.
And so as I'm turning out to walk out the door of this house, she's got the cutest little girl. Like, she's got jet curly black hair and the jiggled chubby cheeks, biggest smile. And as I'm turning to leave home, she turns to me and says in Hebrew, she says, "Be sure and take a security guard. It's really dangerous on the street." And I'm thinking, this 4-year-old girl, this is her reality. This is her life. But she's totally happy and at peace and living in that environment. And so the thing is, I think that people in our American culture don't quite understand the battle that's waging for the land of Israel today. They think it's just a political battle. They think it's a real estate battle. They don't realize it's a spiritual battle between good and evil. It is the forces of evil are trying to take over the world, and that little lady's home and her family and husband that have lived in this hell are the tip of the spear in reality of saving Western civilization for the world. Why? Because if we are not able to defend the rights of the Jewish nation in their ancient homeland, the Jewish pioneers that are establishing the farms on the mountains of Israel, if we're not defending their rights for Western civilization, for freedom in their own land, then guess what? Amarillo, Texas is not going to have freedom in the next coming years. That's the reality. Right. So that's what connects the rest of the world to fighting for the land of Israel, right? We have to be a part of saying this land. I'm talking politically here for a moment in the sense, but in reality, it is the source of good that goes to the world. God has used that as his launching pad.
Okay, let me ask you. Okay, so we're early in on, and I'm almost going to date the program, but we're early in on the Trump administration.
Sure.
You think that'll make a change?
My motto in life as a young guy, and as I've worked on the mountains of Israel and established the farmers, like we've extended their agriculture by 800% on the mountains of Israel. We've literally transformed mountains that were just rocks and briars, and now they're just beautiful vineyard groves. So our thing for the past 12 years is let them talk. Let the political powers talk. They're up there in the stairs. Yeah, they do make things happen that are just, that make things difficult for us. But the true foundation of any country and civilization is those farmers that are digging into the soil. And so what we have done, if you've noticed, and this is something I can take a little bit of credit for, we can't take all because it's been a valiant effort of hundreds, if not thousands of people. Have you noticed that the two-state solution is no longer really being talked about? And this was even almost being it was shifted even under the Obama administration a little bit. Why is it no one talked about? Jimmy Carter, who's not a fan of Israel whatsoever, he basically summed it all up. And when he said this, I said, he nailed it. He said a two-state solution is no longer viable in Israel due to the amount of infrastructure, vineyards, and the amount of growth that has happened within that region. And so Samaria and Judea hold such a strong foundation to the land of Israel now economically, and they have almost 800,000 residents live in that region now. So what is the Trump administration going to do? I'm thankful to God that Trump so far has made very positive gestures in regards to saying we stand with the nation of Israel. I don't know what the next season is going to look like. None of us really do. I think I pray that he continues to make positive choices, but as far as that relationship, who knows? Who knows what's going to take place?
The thing that I think is that Donald Trump, and I had to explain this to a friend last night, Donald Trump is the first seated president that has ever gone to the Western Wall, put his hands on there and prayed.
See, that blows my mind.
Only Bush and Obama and every other president was either not president, they were running for president. But during their 8 years, they never had the guts to, I say that in all love, but they didn't go and pray at the wall. But for Donald Trump,
you're a guy who keeps up on the news. What would you say the reason was?
Well, I would say because, in fact, I went to the inauguration with my good friend Tommy Waller, and we took 2 Knesset members. Donald Trump is not a politician, and I think Donald Trump, in his heart, listened to God, and God said, go to the wall and pray. And to heck with what everybody's going to think about me. His daughter and son-in-law are Jewish. He's a non-Jew. I don't know what's going on, but I tell you what, it's kind of like you put on that seatbelt, get in the plane, and then God tells you what to do. And he did it. So I think that's very significant.
Aren't you proud of him?
I'm very proud of Donald Trump.
So,
We are kind of all holding our breath, hoping that it doesn't change.
well, he's the only guy that could have done anything. Like even like you guys' Texas guy, which we love Ted Cruz, and I think, but even if he was in the White House, he couldn't even put a candle to some of the things that Donald Trump's done, mainly because he would be handcuffed by the Republican Party in a sense.
Well, Ted would tell you.
Right.
I was in a meeting with Ted not too long ago. He knows that Donald Trump's the man.
Right.
That you know, when you in Israel you say Hashem.
Right.
I'm just going to give everybody Hashem is the name of God.
Mm-hmm.
Hashem has certainly done a work because all these wonderful Christians that we met at the inauguration, you know, they've been praying for Donald Trump before the election, and now, like our good friend Rosemary Schindler, Garlow. And so something's going on.
Right.
I'm just like Minnie Pearl. I'm just glad to be here.
Well, I think it's this. This is the biggest thing. And you guys have been around the doomsday world quite a bit. And it's basically, it's an epidemic that's hitting.
No, this
our
is the
Christian
second
world.
time you've talked about our age. Just to let you know.
Sorry. I thought you told me I was 50 earlier, right?
Well,
No, but we've been around a while. But you know,
don't have as
actually
many
last year I had my halfway to 50 birthday, which I was quite ecstatic about because I thought, man, I hit 25. Now I'm in that place of like, now I'm in those glory years of running to the point to where I'm in, like, and actually I'll give you a little kind of a little Caleb theory here. I believe in submission. What does submission mean? Submission means is you submit yourself to someone else's mission until God gives you yours. Okay, submission, right? Because you're in the subject of that person. And one of the most inspirational things that's happened to me recently was that line. And then a friend of mine came to me and said, I believe, and he has an amazing story himself, but it really inspired me. He said, my dad's vision has become my mission, right?
Wow.
And so it's an amazing thing for me because standing here today, I'm in full submission to my father's vision, but it's become my mission. And so I'm saying this, you know, at that 25 mark, I'm sure once I, you know, hit 30, I believe God's going to explode that mission. And that basically now I'm at the challenging point. I mean, I've got 4 little girls now. They're in submission to my mission at the moment, right? Because I'm raising this family, but I want to instill in them the ability to walk in the vision that God's given me as a family, right? So to pull that full circle, we're living in some amazing times, unbelievable times. And the reason what's so exciting about this is the fact that, you know, I mean, if you talk about Trump's visit being extraordinary that he actually prayed at the wall, I think it's extraordinary that he actually prayed at the wall at the 50th anniversary of Jerusalem being recaptured. I mean, there's no coincidence with any of those things. How did that happen? But so you look at those amazing times we're living in, and so you can either be ecstatic and say, wow, God, our generation, my great-grandparents, my grandparents have prayed for the coming of the King. They've prayed, you know, for peace to come to the world. And at the same time, we're sitting here now privileged to witness some of those, because like, it almost seems like, when Israel came back into Jewish hands, we started watching the hour hand, right? Now in Jerusalem in 1967, we started watching the minute hand.
Yeah.
Now that Jerusalem 67, now we're looking at the Temple Mount, we're watching the second hand.
True story.
And things are clicking, right? And so I think for me, and finishing the whole circle here, I believe for any person to be afraid or to be worried at the time we're living in, they're listening to the wrong voice. We've got to be ecstatically in pursuit, like basically saying, our Father in heaven, here we are. Let us be a part of this process together. And I think that's the biggest thing. So,
wow. Okay, so we're gonna have to do this again. Okay. We're gonna have to have a part 2 today. Hey, we're so glad you joined us on the interview. Thank you for being a part of Israel TV Network.
Thank you.
We love you. Appreciate Texans for Israel, Mike Isley, and my buddy, my partner in all this. And we thank you so much for Caleb Waller, who's a part of Hayabel, a big, huge part of it now, and changing the world. It's just amazing. Make sure you catch his show also, Joshua and Caleb Report, right here on ITBN. See you next time.
Thank you.
Shalom, shalom.
Cheers.